I was thinking about this today, guys, and I wanted to ask you a question. What's a phrase that really just bothers you, that boils your blood? Because I got a couple texts today from some friends, some Red Wings fans, one who was at the game, another one who was out here, basically giving me a phrase that kind of sums up what's been going on with the Red Wings 2025-26 season. And that phrase, as you can probably guess, is too little, too late. And I'm guaranteeing you guys have heard that today on social media. What's a phrase that you hate, Devin?
I have another one that I guess kind of you can apply to the Red Wings season. Epic fail. I never really liked that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I know I was telling you guys too, I hated when my parents, when I was younger, and if something wasn't right, I'd say, well, that's not fair. And then, your parents look back at you, well, life's not fair, kid. That one always bothers me. It still bothers me. Tony, what do you got?
If I get a text and it's just the letter K, that boils my blood. It's either my wife saying that and I screwed up and then she's letting me know and I'm getting pissed off at mostly myself for that. But yeah, put an O in front of it. Okay, it's not that hard.
You just said ready in 5 minutes and I just texted back K. Shit, sorry.
Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Hey, it's Carter Bear, and you're listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast.
Welcome to episode 78 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I am your host, Evan Sabrin, joined as always by my co-hosts, Devin Little and Tony Wolak. Guys, thanks for joining us today. Good win for the Red Wings tonight. I don't know how big that win is because the Red Wings still don't control their destiny. Interesting night tonight. The Red Wings blow out the Flyers 6-2. Big night for some of the stars with Dylan Larkin hat trick, Moritz Seider tying the franchise record for points scored by a defenseman. That's kind of crazy that no one, like, you think of Nick Lidstrom, Paul Coffey, and no one has scored, no one's hit 6. And Seider hit 5 tonight to tie the record. That's pretty cool. And what an amazing season he's at least had. But using the word epic collapse right now, it would be an understatement. While tonight's win over the Flyers was good, it kind of brings up more questions than answers. Like, where's this effort been since the beginning of March? I hate saying this, and I know you guys are the optimism. You guys are my optimism usually nowadays, but it's going to be really tough for the Red Wings to make the postseason. I think we've got to face facts. They're probably going to miss it, and it's really sad for a team that led the Atlantic in points as recently as 3 months ago. I mean, they were leading the Atlantic Division and tied for the most points in the Eastern Conference on January 5th and held a 12-point cushion at that time for a playoff spot. This team is flawed. And I feel like we saw a lot of smoke and mirrors this year. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what the Red Wings have to do to improve this roster. We're also going to look at where the Red Wings can find some goal scorers and go over some numbers in that department because it is a problem. We also want to talk about where the Yzerman stands. It kind of feels like they may have taken a step backward this year. And we're also going to look back at that Falk deal now. Was that worth the haul that he gave up, and where do you stand now that first round pick was unprotected? Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone where you can find us. Give us a follow on Twitter at Flying Octopod and check us out on YouTube at The Flying Octopod. You can also listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Smash that subscribe button. We'd love to hear from you. So this past week was more of the same, just seeing devastating loss after devastating loss. Rangers, Wild, and the Blue Jackets. Saturday, they get smoked by one of the worst teams in hockey, 4-1 at Madison Square Garden. Sunday's 5-4 loss to the Wild after battling back from being down 4-1. This has got to be one of the more painful losses of the season because to lose late on one of the worst penalties I can remember seeing in recent memory by Patrick Kane, who ended up saying that was the worst he's ever felt after a game in his career. I think that says something a lot. Tuesday versus Columbus, blowing the lead, 16 seconds left, and then losing in a shootout. Devin, you just said it in the cold open. When you think about this team, the first word that comes to mind is epic collapse. Yzerman's going to have his hands full this summer. What absolutely has to happen in the offseason for this roster that we all know now at this point in the season is very flawed?
I think two things come to mind, and I'll kind of give one little qualifying statement to start it. One, the defense is for all intents and purposes locked in going into next season. So unless there's some sort of significant move on the horizon there, you're going into next season with basically the same defense. So on the forward group here, they need to do two things in my mind. One, they need to add another score in some way, shape, or form. Maybe that's Michael Brandsegg-Nygaard. Maybe he develops over the summer, comes into camp, and he looks like he could be a 20, 25, maybe even 30 goal scorer. I'm trying to pump the brakes a little bit there, but maybe he comes in and blows the door down, right? Maybe you do, maybe you make a big trade. A lot of talk about them going after the Robert Thomases, the Elias Pattersons of the world at the this year's deadline. I imagine they'll revisit those types of talks, but I do wonder if now they maybe lean more towards somebody who is specifically proficient in goal scoring, because it really does feel like if Alex DeBrincat isn't scoring, then I don't know who is. And it's obviously a little bit of an exaggeration, but only a little bit. And then the other thing I think that they need to really commit to in the offseason is figuring out what their identity, or at least what they intend for their identity to be, and then add players that contribute to that. I think that they have a lot of players that contribute to various possible identities, but it's very rare that they seem aligned on any one type of identity. I don't know that you can call them a fast team. There's a lot of guys on this team that are not super mobile. I don't know that you could call this team a super, great grindy team, because there's a lot of jerseys, to use Todd McClellan's verbiage here. I think that the best consistent thing you can say is that there's a lot of two-way forwards, players that can play in both ends of the ice. It's just some of them don't always show up on that end, but there's just kind of a lack of a cohesive identity. And I think that the front office needs to take a very, very brutally honest look at the players that are there and commit to the players that contribute to their chosen identity, and figure out what they need to do with the players that don't, and then kind of figure out where they need to go to from there. There's a lot more pieces to the puzzle, obviously, and we'll talk about that in due time. But to me, those two things really stand out. What about you? Tell me.
More or less on the same page. For sure, they need a top six scorer. This was something that was a need at the trade deadline that did not get addressed, not for a lack of trying, but it just did not come to fruition. And in addition to that, I do think there needs to be a skill infusion in the bottom six, and subsequently have players moved out from there. Now, like you said, Michael Brandsegg-Nygaard could be part of the team next year. Amadeus Lombardi is going to require waivers next year, so he'll more than likely be on the team. Same with Carter Mazur, same scenario. Those three players will help for sure. They are an upgrade for talent over the likes of Michael Rasmussen, JT Compher, Mason Appleton, players like that. I do think there's still room to add from the outside, thinking more like a Mason Marchman or Bobby McMahon, someone who can come in and just bring an element that the Red Wings don't have a lot of, and has the scoring and speed. Marchman has the physicality and the scoring. Upgrade over any of the players I mentioned. Those are the two main areas that should be the priority. I mean, like you said, defense is set unless they want to do something crazy, and then you expect Gibson and Sebastian Cossa to be the goalies next year. So it really is just revitalizing that forward group to be a better team, better offensive generating team at 5-on-5. The Thursday night game against the Flyers, the Red Wings scored 2.12 goals per 60 at 5-on-5 this season. That's not a lot. That's really not a lot. That is third worst in the league. And if they want to be a playoff team, they're going to have to do better than that. Obvious statement here. The fact that they're close to the playoffs and at scoring at that rate, it's kind of impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, you think that if you can sustain the power play and goaltending next year and get a little bit more 5-on-5 offense, playoffs wouldn't be out of the question. But there's obviously a lot goes into that. It's not a slam dunk or anything like that. If you're going to be a playoff team and win in the playoffs and win those grinding games, you're going to have to score at 5-on-5, because playoff opportunities are few and far between come playoff time.
Yeah, and speaking of goal scoring, we've failed to mention that Alex DeBrincat netted his 40th tonight on a nifty little backhand on a sweet pass from Lucas Raymond. First time Red Wings have had a goal scorer since Marian Hossa in 2008, the 2009 season. But I want to stay on this goal scoring thing really quickly here, because since the start of the 2021-22 season, I want to go over the goals for and the goals against. Between now, between then and now, the goals for have gone up 230 in 2021-22, in 22-23, 240, 23-24, 278. Then it dropped back down to 238, and then it's at 228 tonight, heading into tonight's game. The goals against have gone down from 312 in 2021-2022, 238. There's been a significant decline each year, and you can kind of probably attest that to the Sider Evanson. We got better goaltending this season out of John Gibson, but the goal scoring is just a problem. It's outside of DeBrincat, Raymond, Larkin. I don't know how much longer we're going to be counting on Patrick Kane, but there's something that they've got to find, and we've said it all along. They've got to find some kind of depth scoring, especially in the bottom six. It's just been a problem all season long. And Tony, it goes back to your rule of three. If you can't score 3 goals in a game, you're in trouble. The part that scares me the most is what was this team that we saw in the first half of the season and into January, and what has happened since? Because they've played in so many big games these past couple of weeks, and they have come up short, and they have lost in ways you can't even make up. Devin, I'll start with you again. Where do you stand with the Yzer plan now? Because the playoffs were the goal this year, and it was kind of, I don't know if we totally expected it, but from what we saw in the first half of the season, we envisioned it coming back and happening. But not looking forward to next season. Like, are the playoffs going to just be the goal again? And what did you see from this season that gives you any hope that there will be a playoff run next year?
It's a frustrating season. There's no doubt about that. I would even go as far as to say that it might be the most frustrating season of Red Wings hockey I've watched in my entire life. It seems hyperbolic, but it feels like it. Now, that being said, I'll kind of work my way backwards through your question. There are things that give me reasons for optimism. I've seen a lot of good things from young players. Moritz Seider is a Norris caliber defenseman, and he will be a Norris caliber defenseman next season and the following season and the following season. And they've got him locked into what already looks like one of the best contracts in the NHL right now. Same thing, well, not to the same degree, but you've also got a really, really good foundational player in Lucas Raymond too. Very obviously playing hurt, and yet still basically playing at a point per game pace. I'm pretty sure he actually is. And I think he's doing it on one good shoulder right now. And then you're seeing high production from players that should continue to be productive. Alex DeBrincat, we just said it. Just scored 40 goals. I don't see him dropping off next season. He's obviously got 1 year left on his contract, and that's going to be a big thing that's going to hover over him, but I don't see him dropping off next season. Same thing with Dylan Larkin. The core is a good core. Basically, I think where I'm kind of going with this. I think that the other players that you think are going to become part of the core, they have promise to. You feel good about Simon Edvinsson. I think the Marco Kasper will bounce back. I don't know to what degree, but I think he'll have a better season next year than he did this year. And then you've seen promise from players. Emmett Finney, what does he do next season? You obviously hope he doesn't have a sophomore slump, but I've been really impressed by him for a lot of different reasons this season. Axel Sandin-Pellikka, I imagine he'll take another step, and he'll maintain a spot in the Red Wings lineup and maybe even start to overtake Justin Falk and kind of reclaim his spot in that middle pairing. Ideally, that's what you hope for. I guess what I'm saying here is that you're seeing from the older core players like Larkin and DeBrincat, they're doing what they need to do. And then from the younger core players, as well as the prospect, you're seeing enough promise and enough production that you do think it can work. I think that my biggest question, and maybe this is where I'm kind of pivoting to the other part of the question, my question is becoming the timeline. Dylan Larkin is not in his mid-20s anymore. In fact, he's Alex DeBrincat is approaching the 30 mark as well. Players age. Once you hit that magic number 30, it very rarely maintains high for a long period of time. Dylan Larkin's probably going to produce at his current rate for 3-4 more seasons, and then he's dipping down into to like definite second and middle six center territory. And so what's the plan then? So if the plan is to win a Stanley Cup with Dylan Larkin as your top line center, you have to get a lot done in the next 2 years, basically, because you're probably not going to win the Stanley Cup the first chance you get at it. So my biggest question about the Yzer plan right now is, how do the timelines work? Because, like I said, if Dylan Larkin is a big piece of it, you've got to make some big moves this summer because the timeline is not moving on his timeline.
Tony?
But you asked what changed this season. 5-on-5 offense did not change from January to April. It's been the same the whole time. The only problem is the power play cooled off, the penalty kill got a little worse, and John Gibson came back to earth. That's it. That's the only, that is all that's happened. Even with Larkin out and Andrew Kopp out, they were missed for sure. But them being out, it didn't impact those categories as much as you'd think. Whether Larkin was playing or not, power play cooled off. It did. Penalty kill, same deal. Both contribute to the penalty kill. Didn't really change. John Gibson, he's played a lot of hockey this season and he hit a wall. So what needs to change this offseason to make it happen? I mean, Devin covered it pretty well there. Evan mentioned Steve Yzerman's strategy guidance. What I should have said for the phrase that really boils my blood at the beginning of the episode was, what's the deal with the Yzer plan? That boils my blood. When talking heads from the hockey industry just spout off about, oh yeah, the Yzer plan is failing, or, is it time up for the Yzer plan? And it's like, you have not been watching. You've not seen where this team has come from. Stop. Full stop. Number one, the Red Wings started from scratch pretty much. Their prospect pool was shit. Their team was awful. And they built up to being a playoff bubble team, yes, but you're looking at a team now with Yzerman draft picks, Raymond, Seider, Edvinsson leading the way there. And, there's more coming with Kasper, Sandy, and Pelka, like you just mentioned. Secondly, it's Steve Yzerman. The Illiches are not going to fire him. I cannot stress that enough. He is not going to get fired. If anything, at some point, he may move into a president of hockey ops role, like you saw Joe Sakic do with the Avalanche. But from when he was in his playing days, did he ever back down from a challenge? No, of course not. So what makes you think he's going to do that now that the team's been on the bubble for the past couple of years? You think he's going to be I can't figure this out. Sean Horkoff, you try. No, that's not going to happen. He's going to, double down this summer and do what he can to put this team over the top. Now, look, they are close, and there are some major questions that need to be answered this summer for sure. But if you think about it, the Red Wings are this close with this paltry of an offense. If you can just fix that and maintain elsewhere, they're in great shape. That's the optimist side of me. But yes, there needs to be a full scale review done to make sure this sort of collapse doesn't happen again, because it's a trend that we've seen the past few seasons. Doesn't matter if Todd McClellan is coach or not. The core players, the veteran players are supposed to, doesn't matter if Todd McClellan is the coach or not. You have the veteran players that are around Detroit's younger players, the Andrew Kopps, JT Compher, David Perron, Ben Sherrod, you name them. These players are brought in to be the steady veteran leaders, keep this team looking forward. If there are this many collapses on their watch, maybe they're not the right players for that role. That is where I can see an opportunity for bringing in some fresh blood, because if their role is to be that, that leader, it's not a fit. They're not doing the thing that they were brought in to do. So that, I think, is if you want to criticize a component of the Yzer plan, the wrong players are selected. The on-ice performance has been pretty much what you expect for them, but the off-ice locker room stuff, maybe they weren't the right fit. That's also hard to quantify. That's also hard to identify. And, if you're looking at free agents for this, it's not like you're bidding in a vacuum either. It's like you're doing your best to find these types of players and bring them in.
What does that say about the pro scouting department, Tony? I know it's something you brought up this week in one of your articles. Them not finding the right fits. It feels like they've brought in so many of these free agents who just haven't impacted well. You look at what Vladimir Tarasenko is doing with the Wild this season is because he's with a better supporting cast. We saw what Anthony Mantha is doing in Pittsburgh. Even Soderblom's been playing. Soderblom's been playing great in Pittsburgh. So you see all that. You see that narrative, and what has to be done? Is there an issue with the pro scouting department? Could you see massive changes in that area?
I don't think there'd be massive changes. I do think there's always an opportunity to upgrade. But again, if you're looking for talent, that's one thing. If you're looking for leadership qualities, the things that aren't in the box score, it's a little harder to quantify and identify for not being able to speak to these people ahead of time. That's something you have to suss out over time. But you're right. Some of the players that you mentioned, I'm not surprised Soderblom, has performed pretty well in Pittsburgh, getting a fresh start. You're going to see that bump right away. Then with Jonathan Berggren in St. Louis, and then he kind of reverted back to what he was. Anthony Mantha hasn't been with the Red Wings for a long time, so this was a nice find for him, for the Penguins for sure, now that he's healthy. Yeah, Tarasenko, that was just not a fit. He was miserable with Todd McClellan as the coach. He did not sign up for that and did not want to be there. So I presume he's happy now and enjoying himself. So of course he's scoring more. I just think it's a little harder to find those, like when you're looking at like free agents, it's a little harder to find those players to bring in to like be those leaders, because it's not something you find at the box score. It's not something that you like find in microstats. It's something that you kind of have to learn through word of mouth, really, to identify those players, and then you have to outbid other teams to get them on top of that.
One other thing that when we talk about blood boiling and things that bother you, now when you look at this late season collapse and you go back to the Justin Falk trade, which will always bother me. It bothered me the day it happened and what they gave up for Justin Falk. Now, if the Red Wings want to go after, if the Red Wings are going to have to acquire a goal scorer via trade. You gave up a first-round pick and a pretty solid prospect for a 34-year-old Justin Falk. Looking back now, do you think that deal was worth the haul? And especially now, where we're looking at that first-round pick was unprotected. That's what bothers me, is that first-round pick that is unprotected. I don't understand why that one couldn't have been. I feel like most teams like try to, envision that scenario happening, because you just know with the Red Wings luck, somehow those lottery balls are going to find their way into the Red Wings' favor. I like Justin Falk, the player. I would have liked him a lot better at 27 when he went for a 7th round pick and Joel Edmondson and Dominic Bach. But for a 34-year-old in a team that could really use those first-round picks, the future assets, to try and go out and acquire goal scoring this summer, there's not a lot of options. Devin, you mentioned Robert Thomas, Elias Pettersson. There's also been talks of Jason Robertson. You need those first-round picks, and you need, prospects. Obviously, there's other prospects. I thought Buchelnikov was a pretty good prospect, and I know we were very excited about him coming over. So where do you stand on that deal now? And do you think Yzerman would, if he could take that back, do you think he would at this point?
I think that Yzerman found himself in a very impossible situation at the trade deadline. I don't think not making a deal was an option. Let's all put ourselves back into what the mood was on March 1st as we were approaching the trade deadline. Is Steve Yzerman going to make the move that he didn't make last year? Dylan Larkin called him out. He didn't make any moves and his team didn't make the playoffs. Is Steve Yzerman gonna push his chips in? If he walks out of the trade deadline with David Perron and that's it, and they still play, and things play out the way they are, people are calling for his head because he didn't make that move still. Then people don't give a damn that they still have their first round pick. They don't care about the first round any pick anymore. They want to make the playoffs. And so he made a move that in theory was going to help his team make the playoffs. Now, I'm 100% with you. The fact that the first round pick is not protected is like my biggest thing with this deal. I can live with moving on from Buchelnikov. I think he's a really fun prospect. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be a buyer at the trade deadline, you got to be comfortable moving on from a prospect like him. You even got to be comfortable moving on from first round picks if you're going to be a buyer. But they're not a solidified playoff team yet. They're a playoff bubble team, and to not protect your first round pick is it's a choice, that's for sure. And you just got to hope that it doesn't burn them in a big way this summer. But it's whatever at this point. It's that pick belongs to St. Louis. They're probably not getting it back. The fact of the matter is that whether he did or didn't do it, he was always going to catch flack unless the team started winning. And if he didn't do anything at the trade deadline, it would have been way easier to be like, the team is losing because the GM didn't get his team any help at the trade deadline. That's exactly what the narrative was going into the deadline, and he did what he was supposed to do. I also think, and not to get too deep in the woods on this, I think he intended to address that need in a different way. There was that Tyler Myers thing out there. That wouldn't have cost a first-round pick. If he maintains that first-round pick, he acquires Tyler Myers to help the right side of the defense, still has his first-round pick, then maybe he uses that first-round pick to get that forward that the team clearly needed. But since the Myers deal fell through, we still needed to get a defenseman, and St. Louis used the leverage of the situation to get that first-round pick from them. It's a situation I don't think Yzerman wanted to put him. I don't think he intended to be in that situation. I think that the Myers deal was his way of avoiding it. But at the end of the day, he had to do something. And if he didn't do anything, that's what we would be talking about instead.
It's interesting you bring up Tyler Myers, because that's immediately where my head went when Evan brought up this question. Because, I mean, if we go back, we rewind the tape, look at what we talked about before the deadline, what we wrote about, my preference was go for not a depth defenseman, but not a Justin Falk defenseman, like next tier down. Tyler Myers would have fit that. Tyler Myers and Ben Sherratt would have been a pair, but he would have brought an element that the Red Wings really didn't have on defense. That, in my opinion, was the right play for that moment in time. Spend, a second, Soderblom, a third, whatever it is, to get Tyler Myers, and then use that first to go after a forward, whether it's, there at the deadline or in the offseason. But that's what you reserved that first round pick for. Now, they still have to go out and find a forward, top 6 forward. Evan, for what you were saying about that unprotected first round pick, now that the Justin Falk deal is done, we've accepted it, we've moved on, 5 stages of however many stages of grief there is, we're at the end. I don't have any qualms about it being unprotected. Here's why. The Red Wings, if they miss the playoffs, they will pick 16th. They have the 12th best record in the NHL right now. And they are not in the bottom 5, like what we've seen way back in the rebuild. They're not in the top 10. They would be picking 19th or 20th if the season ended today, and that was based purely on standings. But if they end up missing the playoffs, their slot would be the 16th. And usually, when it comes to protecting first-round picks, usually it is a top 12 protected pick, and that's it. Not top 16, not top 10. It's usually top 12. The lotto balls fall a certain way that could certainly sting, but if they
it's a little more than a sting.
I know, with the anti-luck the Red Wings have had with the draft lottery. Yeah, no, you're right.
Would be,
but if
would be kind of fitting if St. Louis got the 6th pick from Detroit, right?
Let's just not put that out there, guys.
Cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah, let's not do that. If the Red Wings draft slot is where it's supposed to be, protecting that pick would not have mattered. So it is what it is to me. We'll cross that bridge with the draft lottery later. No.
That'll be a fun show, huh?
Well, yeah. On a positive note, Red Wings had a great game on Thursday night. Moritz Seider is looking like a Norris Trophy defenseman. Dylan Larkin set a career high for goals. Brinkhead is the first 40-goal scorer since Marian Hossa, and if he gets 3 more in the last 3 games, he'll tie Zetterberg for the most in the salary cap era for goal scoring. I mean, it's going to be a fight to the finish, I'm sure, but man, a few points here and there would have gone a long way. And that's something that this team is going to have to, live down in the offseason and learn how to rebound from.
Yeah, there's so many games you can think about now. And it's always the most recent ones, but the Columbus game is going to bother me. That Minnesota game is going to kill me.
The Vegas game where they gave up the 6-on-5 goal and then lost in overtime.
Yeah. Where was this effort before, though? What they showed tonight, they were on fire. You see Seider's reaction after his little one-timer goal there? They were pumped up, and it's going to be a fight to the finish here. But realistically, let's just say, I feel like we've been reading their obituary tonight. There is a slim chance with 3 games remaining. Let's go over the Red Wings and the Sens' last 3 games. So the Red Wings got some help tonight. The Sabres beat Columbus 5-0, but the Sens, they also won 5-1 over the Panthers, so didn't get help there. Red Wings are currently 3 points behind the Senators, with both teams having 3 games to play. Red Wings, 3 remaining games, so they will play the Devils on Saturday. Then it's off to Florida to take on the Lightning on Monday and the Panthers on Wednesday. Yeah, so the Senators will play the Islanders on Saturday, Devils on Sunday, and the Leafs on Wednesday. Not exactly a murderer's row there, which would have really helped out in the Red Wings. But hey, this is hockey. We've seen crazier things happen. But I think it's hard. I think a lot of Red Wings fans are still trying to process what happened this season, because it felt like it came in a flurry. And these last 2 weeks, just with the losses mounted up, this is their first win in their last 6 games tonight at the time of this recording. And it's tough to watch. It is tough to watch a rebuild take this long. We understand the circumstances, Tony, which you pointed out tonight. A lot of people are in a different mindset as far as their thoughts on the Yzer plan. By the way, we can make a great drinking game out of that. Every time you get a text from a known media personality talking about how the Yzer plan has gone wrong and failed. And Tony, you made some great points there about the fact that they don't really talk about where this team started. They just look at the number of years that it's taken. And there's a lot more that goes into a rebuild than just that many years. Part of me feels like the Red Wings have always been at the right place at the wrong time, when it comes to drafts, especially when it comes to the superstars, the Macklin Celebrinis, the Connor Bedards, the super game changers. The Red Wings were not in that position. They also weren't in the position when, Montreal and Philadelphia were getting the Mishkovs, the Demidovs, a couple other game changers. I know Mishkov, he's still young. I think he'll develop. It all comes down to stuff like that. There's so many different variables that can happen to a team where you get a player. We talk a lot about like the Philip Sedina situation. Well, what if they had drafted Evan Bouchard, or what if they had drafted Quinn Hughes? Maybe your team's different then. Maybe then you're in a different spot for Moritz Seider, or a different spot when you come to draft Lucas Raymond. There's just way too many variables, and I don't think people address that enough. But it's safe to say that this season was pretty disappointing. But tonight was a little glimmer, spark of hope, I think, for Red Wings fans. I know. I had some friends there tonight, and they said they had a great time, and the arena was, pretty pumped up and rocking. Yeah, it's sad. Any final thoughts, boys, before we wrap up this episode? I know I just read an obituary there.
You sure did.
I'll give you this, guys, for last comment. What's the Red Wings record in these final 3 games, if you had to predict?
3-0. Hell yeah.
You're going 3-0?
Yeah.
You're saying balls to the wall, Devils, Lightning, Florida. They're going to run the gauntlet.
Sure. As Evan steps away from the podium, taps the casket, and walks back to his seat. Yeah.
Well, I opened the casket, punched it. Yeah. Devin, what has to happen?
I'm gonna say they go 2-1. Yeah, maybe a loss. That loss in the last game of the season where neither team is really caring at all.
I love ending the show on a good note.
Yeah.
So much positivity. We try not to be doom and gloom here, but God, there comes a point where it's like, it's just inevitable. You've got to face the facts. And what I admire the most about you guys is you guys are not just Red Wings fans, but you had the optimistic look, the glasses half full look, where there's me, doom and gloom, asshole. Like, what does that say about me? I gotta figure that out with my therapist. But that's going to do it for episode 78 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. Hopefully we didn't send you to therapy tonight for our listeners with the depression that we brought in.
It was therapy. We provided therapy. Yeah.
Maybe we could rebrand ourselves as the Red Wings
Feelings
therapist.
you are feeling are natural, and they are okay.
This is a safe space on the Flying Octopus Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.